Welcome to this episode of Game of Leadership, the podcast for curious leaders. I'm Paula Eddie Wilcox, and I'm delighted to welcome our guest for the second time, where we're looking at their take on the game and leadership aspect of the podcast. Who knows what we might find out, because we all look at this differently, and it's always so interesting to see what the guests have in store for me when I turn up, because we never plan this in advance. So I hope you're as excited as me. Let's get into it, and I'll see you on the other side. Welcome to this week's episode of Game of Leadership, the podcast for curious leaders. I'm delighted to welcome back Tom Willis, CEO, superintendent, supporter for culture, to create cultures in schools and places that you would want to be part of. It sounds really exciting what you do, and I know we'll get to hear more about that. Certainly had a good start in last week's episode, but today and next week as well. Tom, welcome back.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me back. I'm excited for today's topic, especially.
Okay, well, without further ado, let's dig in. So what I like to ask in this episode for our guests is the title of the podcast is, of course, Game of Leadership. Now, we've had all sorts of ideas, takes on that title in terms of what does Game of Leadership mean to you? Does game and leadership go together? Does it not? So I will be quiet and let you go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this, Paula, and it's a great question because it is an interesting combination of words. And I think where I'd start is that most leaders, well, I'll talk for myself. We're playing the wrong game. We actually may not even know what game we're supposed to be playing, to use that game analogy. And it goes back to just how we're promoted within most organizations. We're promoted because we typically are really good at getting stuff done. We're really good at producing results and getting things done efficiently, effectively, within budgets. And so we get promoted up the ladder accordingly. The challenge is when we get to a leadership position, especially a CEO or a school superintendent position, where you're now the person that's overseeing everything, is that many of us think our job is to be the super doers. It's like at this point we spend our entire life doing things and getting things done that we think, okay, well, now I just need to do more. And really, we're in a completely different game. We've got to almost change our mindset by 180 degrees and go a totally different direction than where we were. I'll speak for myself. When I became a CEO, I was only 34 years old. I was very excited. In many ways, I felt prepared because I'd been doing different leadership positions. I've grew up playing sports. I played lacrosse and soccer and basketball, and was fortunate enough to play some lacrosse in college. And so I always had leadership opportunities throughout my life. I got my MBA along the way at Notre Dame, but in many ways, I also didn't feel prepared at all. It was like the paradox of I'm ready, I'm excited, and I'm terrified and feeling under prepared and not really ready. And what I had to do was realize that, I had to stop going in my office and cranking out work. I had to do the opposite. I had to go out and lead and go out and inspire and go out and help people find their own sense of aspiration. I had to help people by coaching them, by providing insights, by providing different ways of looking at things, at creating a culture where people felt psychologically safe enough that they could speak up and share their opinions and their ideas, where we were creating a culture of integrity where people would do what they say they would do. Now, did I do all those things 100% fidelity and perfectly all the time? Absolutely not. But it was the mindset shift that really helped me, is that I had to realize that I was playing a very different game than what the game I thought I was playing.
Yeah, that really is a moment, I think, that you had, I certainly had, as I was learning to be a better leader over the years, and all the different job roles and things that I've taken part in over the years and played, if we're going to use that game analogy. And it is a very different mindset shift. I'm not sure I would have used those exact words all those years ago, but it takes a very different approach. And the fact that you said, you felt that you had to just do more of what you'd already been doing and be that super doer. I think that's a great expression and way to describe it, Tom, because many of us feel when we get into those leadership roles, well, now what am I going to do? I was already working, coming in at 8 o'clock instead of 9 o'clock, and I was already going home at 6 o'clock instead of 5 o'clock. Now what do I do? Now I'm the leader and I've got to do longer and more and more and more, and it gets overwhelming. It's taking that step back and realizing that you put it beautifully. You are playing a completely different game. And actually, what you're there to do, and I love this analogy, is to be that conductor of the orchestra. Because, suddenly you're helping to lift those other people up to be the doers and shine, so that they might be your successor in a few years' time, or that they're going to get promoted into another role or whatever else, and to deliver great things as a team, create opportunities for others to collaborate. We talked about the culture work that you do in our first episode together. Create that culture where people feel safe. You said the term psychological safety, one of my favorite things to talk about. Do you know Amy Edmondson from Harvard? Who's done a lot of work on the psychologial safety piece. Fascinating lady, and worked on a program with her a few years ago for a leadership program delivery, and she was one of the professors. Amazing lady, and she just has done some incredible work on what it means to be psychologically safe, the elements that you need to create that. And if I had to strip it back, it's not that difficult. It just takes a shift in mindset and that trust. You've got to build that trust to make it successful.
Yeah. The trust is absolutely critical, and that's part of the work, is to realize, I'm not in the business of getting things done myself. I'm in the business of getting things done through others, and in order to do that, I've got to build that trust. I've got to build relationships that are significant and that have meaning, because the larger the relationship, the more you can get done. It's not rocket science, but we don't often think about it that way. If you think about a car mechanic, somebody who works on a car, well, you never take your car to somebody who doesn't know how an engine works, right? Or how the car combustion system works, or how all these pieces fit together. But as leaders, we don't really know what it is that we're working with. We don't know what's the engine, what's the corollary in my work. And it's really, we think, the human spirit. It's not just the mind, but it's we humans are emotional beings. Mm-hmm. If we want to be effective as leaders, we have to figure out how to tap into that emotion. And it's not emotion like drama and all the sort of negative thoughts that come up to mind for a lot of us. It's if you think about emotion, it has the same root as motion. So if you want to get people in motion, if you want to create a powerful team and a powerful culture, then you've got to tap into the emotions of human beings and have them aspire to something bigger than themselves. Because when you can do that, watch out, you will accomplish so much more. Because unfortunately, most of our organizations are stuck in the Paleolithic age, and they're still trying to manage people. And management, you cannot manage people. We can talk more about that if you want, but you actually cannot manage people. It's a fallacy out of the gate. Mm-hmm. And you have to. Now, you do need to use management. It's a very important skill in your toolkit. But fundamentally, your primary job is to lead people. It's to inspire them. It's to get them in motion.
That idea of getting people in motion is a great idea, I think, or a great analogy to use, Tom, because we are emotional human beings. The very nature of who and what we are and how we're made up and how we show up. The fact that I've talked about purpose and passion and courage and bravery, all of those things are part of our emotions, and that trust comes into the emotions side of it, because you either feel like you trust someone or you feel like you don't. There's something going on in there that's making you feel that way. So again, it taps into that emotional center in the brain. But it's what's interesting to me over the last few years is that piece that's emerging around emotional quotient. Now, I don't know too much about it yet, but I know that it fascinates me and it's piqued my interest. And when I get time, we're all running out of time, aren't we? But I'm lucky enough to have read a few articles and things that I've come across. And I've always kind of joked that, my emotional quotient is much higher than my IQ. I've got a great EQ, not a great IQ. Perhaps I'm doing myself an injustice, but you get the idea in that, EQ is very, very important. Being able to tap into how the team is feeling about a big decision that's just been done to them, like in a restructure, for example, and understanding how to support them through that. Nobody can teach you that in a management book or on a management course. You've got to lead yourself through that. And it's tough. And if you haven't got the emotional piece to support you, the emotional intelligence, it suddenly becomes quite tough to navigate.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, that comment about your own IQ may be your critic there that we talked about.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm not that mean to myself, I promise. Yes, darn my critic and guru on my shoulders. But it is so interesting when you start to sort of dig into what makes us human. What helps us. One person perhaps lead better in someone's perception than somebody else. And you said, we can talk about that a bit later, where you said, I don't think it's possible to manage people, or however you phrased it. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, we've got, if you want to go about shaping a culture, a few things are important. One is you have to realize that what makes culture so hard to improve or to change is that it's mostly unconscious. There's no such thing as an organizational culture, because there's no such thing as an organization. An organization is just a legal entity on a piece of paper. An organization is a bunch of people that just happen to work together for some sense of shared future that they're working towards. At least the ones that survive. The organizations that don't have that sense of shared future are the ones that fall apart, frankly. But if you've got that, then you've got a quote unquote organization, which is just a bunch of people that work together. So if you're going to shape a culture, what you're really working on is the people within that organization. And most of us people are not conscious of most of what we do. It's the old iceberg analogy. So if you want to go about improving a culture, you have to tap into what's below the surface for everybody and get people to start seeing what's really driving them emotionally below the surface. And this is highly pragmatic. This works every time, by the way. It's why our clients are satisfied. It's why we're able to actually guarantee and promise results to the CEOs that we work with, because we've tapped into this insight. So that's the first step. And then if you're going to go about shaping the culture, then you've got lots of tools, but really three primary tools to go about doing that. One is leadership. The second is coaching. And the third is management. And leadership always has to come first, because leadership is about generating a future that others take on as their future. not compliance. It's a genuine excitement about a future together. And when I'm excited about something, then I'll go to work to make that happen. And so that's the first and second and third job, is to make sure that day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, that shared sense of purpose is there, that shared sense of future is there. And that's really what leadership is about. And a lot of people complain that, well, it doesn't last. Well, that's true. But like Zig Ziglar said, neither does the effect of taking a shower, but we still recommend it for people regularly, right? So, leadership is one of those things we have to do over and over and over again. And that's our job. If you don't like that, well, tough. That's your job. You should go get a different job if you don't like having to constantly inspire and create that shared future together. So that's the first one. Coaching, is relatively straightforward. It's how do we get to that future? It's helping each other. It's being willing to not pretend like we have all the answers. It's reading a book. It's going to a conference. It's hiring a professional coach. It's asking your colleagues what they would do if they were you. All of that supports making progress towards the future. And then the last is management. And when I say management, I mean the tool, not the person, not a manager, not the person, but it's a tool. If you're a coach, then you need to lead and manage. If you're a leader, you need to manage and coach. If you're a manager, you need to lead and coach. You need to use all three of these to be effective. And so with management, you cannot you cannot manage people. What you can manage is promises and commitments that people make. So if I'm excited about something and I'm committed to it in the future, I've got leadership on board. And then we make agreements. Okay, well, why don't you do this and you do that and I'll do this. And let's come back in a week from now and we'll meet to talk about the progress we're making. Does everybody agree? Yes. Okay, great. We have an agreement between us. We're all going to go do things over the next week and we'll come back and report out on how we're doing. Well, great. Now I have something to manage. It's the person's promise to do something. It's how you create a culture of integrity. And so just one more thought on this. If you think about creating a culture of integrity, it has the same root as to integrate. And so, okay, well, what are we integrating? Well, you're integrating your word and your action. When you say something and then you do it, you're integrating your word and your action. That's what it means to be integrous. To have integrity is you do what you say you're going to do. And that's what it takes to build a culture of integrity, is where you create a culture where everybody does what they say they're going to do. Doesn't mean that you're going to be perfect at this. Again, we all have to support each other and sometimes we'll fall down, but most of the time, we are doing what we say we're going to do. And that's what really creates a strong culture.
Yeah, that idea of integrity within the culture is so important. I often talk about, committing and taking action, because if you don't commit to what you've, in your case, as you're saying, what you've said, and you then don't take action on it, there wasn't any use in saying it in the first place. And people are just going to lose that trust. We talked about trust, didn't we, earlier? And I often think about management as sort of managing processes, and sort of leading being much more to do with people. And we've talked about the emotional side, and you gave a lovely breakdown of the leadership, the coaching and the management there, which I think will be helpful to people. But that important point about you need all three. There's going to be an element of processes in managing a team. There's going to be an element of leadership, because without that lead, without that rudder, without that guiding light, and it doesn't have to be one person, we're all leaders in our own right. And that, that's something I feel very strongly about. Whether you're the coordinator in the junior position you've just joined, you're leading yourself first. You might not have a great big team underneath you yet, or might not ever want that, but leadership starts somewhere, doesn't it? So that piece, and then that coaching piece, that lovely, supportive, collaborative thought partnership, whatever you want to call it, that allows it all to fit together and work, we hope, seamlessly, which creates that beautiful culture that you're helping your clients to work towards.
Yeah. And there's so much. I mean, we could talk about these 3 ideas, concepts, tools for 5 hours and still,
I'm sure.
still have a lot more to discover. So we're kind of giving it a cursory glance or cursory run by at this point, because one of the things that's critical for coaching, as we say, is that coaching is only coaching if it's asked for. Far too many organizations have started to use coaching as an excuse to tell people what to do. And that's not coaching. That's being a dictator. That's sort of, management 50 years ago. Is that the reality is nobody likes to be told what to do. And if you're going to be an effective leader, then you've got to figure out, how do I get somebody to want to do something? It's why I'm not actually a big fan of delegating. Because if you think about delegating, who am I serving the most when I delegate to somebody else? It's me. I'm getting something off of my plate. Okay. And now there are times for that. And obviously none of these rules are sort of 100% all the time. But as a general course, if people aren't excited to take something on, then you're not effectively leading them in the first place. Because if I effectively lead and I get you excited about doing something, then you're going to want to do it. Now I don't have to delegate it. You just take it because you want it. It takes a little bit more time maybe on the front end, but the results that you produce are 10 times better because the person actually wants to do it. And so back to coaching, coaching is only coaching if it's asked for. You've got to create that space where people are actually able to say no. My business partner and I, our team will say to each other, no, I'm not open right now. I'm actually not having a great day and I can't hear it. Yeah, I'm interested, but not right now. Can we talk in a couple of days? That's totally fine. You need to give people permission to say no, because otherwise it's not coaching. It's something else, but it's not coaching.
Yeah, that idea of having coaching put upon you, if you like, is, well, you'll know, because I'm a coach, I'm definitely not a big fan of that, because, it's just horrible to have been put in that position as a coach. Thankfully, I haven't. Somebody hasn't been given to me because they've been told they've got to have some coaching, which is, my idea of something awful, I would say. As much as I've discussed with clients who've chosen me because they've chosen to take coaching at that particular time in their lives, where they've said, I had this experience where I was given a coach and I was told I had to have coaching, and then describe how that felt. For some people, that puts them off coaching forever.
Yes.
And that's such a shame, because it's such a fabulous tool when it's done in the right way and people are receptive and they want to do it. And I do often describe it as thought partnership, because when do we ever make time for ourselves to think about things and just talk freely and, in that safe space, without judgment, without direction? That delegation piece, without having something given to me that I've got to do. If you come out with a string of actions from your coaching session, that has to be because you chose to have a string of action from your coaching session, not because I told you that you've got to do these things before I see you next week. It's an entirely different thing then. So yeah, I feel very, very connected to what you've said there.
Yeah, it's unfortunately it's missing in lots of organizations, because you're right. We bring in a quote unquote coach to fix somebody. Well, that's already not going to work out of the gate. And usually it's a lack of leadership and it's a lack of effective management. And what I mean by that is you're not effectively inspiring somebody. You're not giving them a future that they care about. And so you're not leading, which means you're not doing jobs 1, 2, and 3. Now, occasionally you're doing that and it's still not working. Okay, well then moving on to management, what promises have they agreed to produce? What results have they agreed to produce for you as their leader? Well, a lot of times it's very wishy-washy. It's very nebulous. It's this, well, I have high expectations. They're not meeting my expectations. Well, that's great. I don't know what to do with expectations. That could not be less specific. What specifically are you asking them to produce? And then are they producing it or are they not? Because if they're not, then usually that's what produces an interest in coaching is, hey, look, yeah, I think you're great. If you got a good relationship with them, you can say, look, I love you. You're just not getting the job done. And I think you can get there, but you're just not currently. And this can't continue. I'd love to be helpful to you. I'd love to figure out a way to help you to have a breakthrough. One of my suggestions is that we get a coach, that we find a coach that could be helpful to you. But I'm not going to tell you have to, because that's not coaching. That's something you're interested in. Now, if the person says yes, okay, great. Now you actually have something to work with because they want it. But if they don't say yes, then do not go find them a coach, because it's already going to fail out of the gate.
No, you're absolutely right. I've seen it, unfortunately, in reality, where people are pushed into coaching and for that fixing purpose. I've got somebody who's not doing this. Well, how about you have that proper leadership conversation with them, instead of just saying, here's your fix, here's the coach, now go ahead and get them to do this, because they're not doing it. I don't know what it is. I've told them what they've got to do and they're just not doing it. This isn't helpful, is it?
Yeah.
And sadly, over my many years, I've seen that happen more than a few times, and it's a shame. But I'm an innately positive person, Tom. So I like to think that with the work that you're doing, the work that I'm doing in On Point Leadership, the work that other fantastic coaches and culture experts and whatever other consultants are out there helping us do great work to help open people's eyes to see that it doesn't have to be difficult. We need to be there to give the right support at the right time, and create opportunity for people to thrive. That's where the magic happens, right?
Exactly. It is truly where the magic happens. If you think about leadership management coaching, it's like a Venn diagram for any of you fellow nerds out there. And in the middle, where all three overlap,
yeah,
that's results. That's where you get results. This is not soft, squishy work. If this doesn't produce results, if you're not getting results from your current coach or coaches, then stop immediately and go find somebody that can help you produce results, because that's really what it's about. It's not about creating soft skills for the sake of soft skills. It's ultimately, how do we get better as individuals and as a team, so that we're having more fun, we're producing more value for the world, we're out there being of service and providing a benefit to the world, because that's a great place to work. Too often we've got an imbalance right now, especially I think, between self-care and purpose. When those things get out of whack, then we're in trouble. And that's what happened before the pandemic is the purpose of the organization, the commitment to that outweighed, and people were kind of killing themselves by working a lot. Well, now the pendulum has kind of swung, where a lot of organizations, it's all about self-care. And I don't want to work, 5 hours a day, and I don't want to work on Fridays. And why do I have to come to the office? Well, because we're so focused on the person and what they want, we forgot that we're here to serve a purpose. We're here to serve the world. Our organization is here to do something that matters. And so it's never in perfect balance, but effective leaders work to create that sense of balance between, what's our shared purpose, and then how do we take care of ourselves and take care of each other? Because when those things get out of whack, we see the consequences of it.
You're absolutely right. Reigniting that purpose and that reason to believe in what we're doing at an organisation. And if you realise that it's no longer the right organisation for you, that's okay. You get to make a choice and go do something different that does serve you, that does feel aligned with your personal purpose and, you know, what change you want to make in the world as you show up as the leader that you want to be. And I think, you know, so many people have suddenly found their inner voice through the pandemic. You know, it's a shared experience that we've gone through all around the globe. Who knew that was going to happen to all of us? I mean, the mind boggles at what we've all been through and the changes that have taken place as a result. But I think I like to think that the longer term outcome of the changes that will make for people as individuals and for organizations and the way they choose to run their businesses will be positive.
Yeah, I think so too. And in fact, that's exactly why we're so excited about this book writing, because it's called The Great Resignation, with resignation crossed out, and then it says engagement. So the great engagement. And it's really, engagement is the antidote to a lot of the resignation that's out there. Is we've got to help people find some engagement, something that gets them out of bed and gets them excited to go to work. And that's really the job of leadership, is to make sure that's happening. If your people aren't engaged, it's not your people's fault. It's yours as the leader. You've got to try on some new tools and try on some different approaches, because effective leaders create highly engaged cultures where people are excited to come to work and excited to contribute and excited to make a difference.
Yeah, I think I can't add anything to that. You said it beautifully, Tom. I think that engagement is key, and you can see it when you walk into a room. If the team isn't engaged, you can just feel it, can't you? And it makes my heart sink. Thankfully, it hasn't been for a while. And I get excited trying to make my team's environment as exciting as we can, working remotely as we do, for most of the time. But it really is lovely then when we come together face to face, which happens, a couple of times in a year's cycle. But yeah, it is interesting. And look, you've shared some fascinating wisdom and guidance in terms of how to start making those steps towards changing that culture within the organization so that it thrives. Because whilst you're supporting CEOs and superintendents of schools, this stuff translates to all organizations. It's just, what you've shared is, transitions across all industries, all leadership, all management, all coaching, and it all is very helpful to the listeners. So thank you for the knowledge and wisdom that you've shared today.
Yeah, thank you, Paula. It's been fun.
Fantastic. Well, we've got Tom for one more episode next week. So with that, I will wish you a great week ahead, Tom. And thank you so much again for today. And I'll see you next week.
All right. Thanks, Paula.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Game of Leadership, the podcast for curious leaders. I always think the game episode is one of my favourites because we get a real insight to our guests' take on their ideas of how games and leadership fit together. Every one of them is different, and just when I think there isn't another take that we haven't thought of or covered, one of our guests comes up with something totally different and unique. It's really exciting. Look, now it's your turn. See what you think, see what resonated with you most, and as always, I encourage you to reflect on what you've heard and see what that might mean for your leadership moving forwards. I'm Paula Eddie Wilcox, and this is Game of Leadership, the podcast for curious leaders. I really look forward to seeing you all next week. Bye for now.